Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Cody Loughlin. Cody Loughlin, after spending 20 years in finance and opening 13 businesses as a serial entrepreneur, has discovered the secrets to being financially free. Our schools are failing to teach anything about what money is and how it really works. Cody is on a mission to change young people's financial trajectory through education and helping parents talk to their kids about money. Welcome to the podcast, Cody.
I am so happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you. And I'm just really happy that you have the listening audience that you do, the welcome, and hopefully that we can find some really good nuggets of gold and some good conversation to bring some value to them.
Yeah, so just so people can get to know you, tell us about you.
Sure. It's a bit of a story, but I'll give you a little bit of the background so you kind of know how I ended up where I am today. But I was born in Washington State and moved to Florida when I was, I think, 3 or 4. Actually, it was 3 because for my 4th birthday, my dad promised me to take me to Disney World. So I got to go to Disney World. And I grew up playing tons and tons of sports. I was a 3 sport athlete all the way through high school. Played college football for a little while. When I was 19 years old, I went to UCF, and I wanted to be a marine biologist. And it was something I just really wanted to work in the oceans, that kind of stuff. I got to school. They didn't have a marine biology program. They also didn't have a doctorate program. So we all got lumped together in the same biology program. So I got to go into the doctor track, which I didn't really enjoy that much for me. And my first year, I took a finance class. And in that finance class, I found out about compounding interest, which is something that Albert Einstein calls the 8th wonder of the world. And the most powerful tool in the universe, right? And I started doing calculations and in this finance class, and my mind was absolutely blown. I just couldn't believe that the amount of money, the way that you could make money multiply, right? And I couldn't believe it. And we'd already gone through like what mortgages were and what, how car loans and interest rates work and borrowing, lending and all this stuff. And I remember specifically on compound interest, I remember sitting there and just being like blown away. And then I got really angry because I was like, I can't believe I had a pottery class in high school. Like, why don't I know this stuff? Like, I'm going to have to go out into the world and know about money and finances. And I kept thinking about all the kids in my school who were never going to have this opportunity to be in this finance class to learn these things. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I had 12 years of English class and I can barely spell, like, what is the deal? Right. And I have no interest in that either. And so I'm like, this is crazy. So that's kind of where the seed got planted. At the same time, I also read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you haven't read it, but it's basically a very basic breakdown between someone who has a working father and he's very successful in the working world, but he ended up being his poor dad, and his business father who is entrepreneurial and investment real estate and really learns the value to investing. So I read this book. I also, at 19 years old at the same time, I lost my dad like the exact same time. And we were very, very close. And so all that kind of ties in as I'll kind of tie it together here at the end for you. But I had this drive to do something, and I just kept telling everybody, I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And I'm sure 99% of the people laughed at me. There were a few that were like, man, I believe in you. You're going to do this. And so fast forward a few years, at 27 years old, I own 4 companies. I'm a millionaire. I have a beach condo. I have several rental properties, and I think I've got the world by the tail. Like I'm the greatest person at business who's ever worked in business, because this was so easy to do. And at 28, I had foreclosures, IRS liens, 4 closed companies, and about $700,000 worth of debt and no income. So clearly the rocket I was on was a bottle rocket, not a rocket to the moon. And so I had to do some serious soul searching. Obviously, it was quite a quite a shock, quite a blow. This is 2008, where a lot of people went through a lot of rough times. I took it to the extreme for fun, I guess. But my wife and I at that point had to figure out what we were going to do because we really just didn't have any options. And I ended up, and there's a story that goes along with it, but I ended up becoming a commercial banker by a lot of pushing, a lot of perseverance. And I wanted to go into businesses because I clearly didn't know how to run one. I knew how to make the bell ring. I could bring the dollars to the table, but at the end of the year, I mean, I'm the guy with a box of bank statements in a shoebox and drops it off and goes, let me know what I owe, like I didn't even keep books. It was awful. And so, but I dove really hard into another thing where I went back to my finance roots and I found out about a thing called FIRE, which was financially independent, retire early, right? The acronym is FIRE. So there's a whole community for this. And I said, man, I want to do this. Like I am so far in the hole, like, but these guys are living financially free. They're financially independent, retire early. And basically what it is that your passive income outweighs your monthly net necessity of income that you need. Right. So your passive income is more than your bills, basically. And I thought, man, that would be amazing. Like, cause then I could do whatever I wanted. It doesn't mean you retire, but it means that like, you could do what you want. And so I decided that I wanted to be that by 39 before 40, because clearly the 30-year-old thing didn't work out as well as I thought it was going to. So here I was going to go back. So became a commercial banker for a while, went in thousands of businesses, worked my tail off and prepared myself and got an opportunity. In that opportunity, I went to work for an RV dealership where the guy wanted to retire in a couple of years. I went there, I learned the business and bought the company. And 5 years later, we did $51 million in revenue in 1 year, and a publicly traded company bought us out. I learned a lot of lessons along the way with that as well. But at that point, I went to work for them for a while, and I just wasn't an RV dealership guy. Like I never really sought it out. It just, was one of the things that came up. And so, I continued, and at that point I had become buyer. I had built these recurring revenues. I'd built this passive income and real estate portfolio and stuff. And so, I had a dream job, multiple six figures, regional vice president, 2 seats from the CEO, one of the youngest ones in there. Like I had this like amazing career path, like just laid out right in front of me. And I told my wife one night, I said, I watched a lot of, oddly enough, I watched a lot of marketing videos one day, and I was just like, I was very unhappy. I had 2 little kids I just wanted to be around all the time. And I walked in at like 1:00 in the morning, woke my wife up. I said, hey, I'm going to quit next week. And as the most amazing wife ever, she says, why don't you just quit tomorrow? I said, great. I said, don't you want to know what I'm going to do? Because I was all jazzed up. She was like, no. She's like, I believe in you. You'll figure it out. You can tell me another time. I'm like, come on, please wake up. I want to tell you all about this. I was on fire, So, so long story short, I had to go to sleep without telling her my grand ideas. I walked in, I quit the next morning, and I never really looked back. I took a few months off trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a lot of opportunities on the table, and I couldn't get this out of my head that I was very fortunate with some breaks in my life, and I still felt the wrongdoing of not teaching kids the finance rules and things that I know that I learned, and that I had to learn the hard way. And it just, and the adults that I know, and I just talked to so many people about credit, and I've done finance for 20 years, and people just really have none of the basic tools to understand, because it's not set up for you to win. Right. And so, and that I decided, you know what, I'm going to figure out a way to do this. And so I started the newest company, which is called Money Talkers. And I started a podcast, and basically I bring in entrepreneurs and amazing parents and those kind of things. And I talk to them, and I try to draw out of them the things that got them to where they are. because I feel like a lot of times when people see people very successful, they feel, well, they either were handed that, or they were an overnight success, or they just had this brilliant idea. You know, I talked to I talked to a guy today who basically started Carvana, which is the largest car dealership in the used car dealership in the country, at $25 billion worth. And he was like, yeah, every overnight success you see coming out of Silicon Valley is 10 years in the making.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you know, I want kids to have the basics, though, because if they can have the basics and they connect with their parents. So there's two parts to this. One is um they're going to have the educational basis, and then we're going to be able to pass that from the experiences that we have, because we're going to break this taboo of being a money talker, right? We're going
Mhm.
to break this thing where people just have this anxiety to talk, even to their friends, to their family, but especially to their kids. You know, they just don't. We don't. My parents talked to me. I saw entrepreneurship all the time, so I just assumed I was gonna. You know, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I just figured I'd open businesses. I had no idea. You know, because it
Mhm.
was just natural to me. My parents were entrepreneurs, but we never talked about budgets. We never talked about mortgages. We never talked about, like, I was a finance major and I didn't know what a mortgage was when I became a mortgage broker. I really didn't even know what it really was. And so in that, there's the ability to, one, put better information in front of them, because you're going to get your information from your surroundings. And if you come from a lesser neighborhood, you're going to have lesser advice, right? Everyone's willing to give you advice.
Mhm.
But if you come from people, you know, if you come from successful families, like, a lot of times the kids are very successful because they they're catching their parents' knowledge, right? But why is it? It doesn't need to be that way. And you know, we need to have the opportunities. We need to we need to at least give them, the kids, a shot to say, hey, you know what? I want to learn more about this. And so there's one part in there. The second part is, like, in the entrepreneurial world, you know, the bigger the problem you can solve, the more money you can make, right? And it's very difficult to take the risks to go out to solve big problems if you're tied down already with life and debt and, you know, the things that slow entrepreneurs down. Well, if kids have the ability to pick up this information very quick and assimilate very quick, and they see problems, they're going to be able to go out and change the world, right? They're going to go out and be able to solve big problems and just take on big challenges, because, one, they're not going to know any better to be scared, and they haven't conditioned themselves to think that they can't do it yet, like many of us have. And then two, they don't have the reins on them yet, you know, so they can go out and do these things and take these big risks. Actually, much like what I did, you know, I failed some, but it's worked out really well. I've had 13 companies, 10 of them have failed. Three of them, actually, now I'm at four. Four of them have done 7 figures in revenue. All right. And so the last part is that I want it to open up the relationship between parents and kids. And so, as I see it over and over again, that as kids get to where they have big money challenges, you know, later in life, like, do I take this job across the country, or do I buy this house, or do I put my money in cryptocurrency, or like whatever it is, right? If parents have built this wall up where, like, you don't talk about finances their entire growing up life, because you just either have anxiety about it, you're embarrassed about it, or whatever, you don't feel you're expert enough. And then at 25 they expect their kid to come to them, and they haven't laid that groundwork, it's much less likely to happen. And so the kid's going to go out and make the mistakes, right, that they made, or that I've made, or, you know, they're not going to get the best shot at being successful through these things, because they're not going to leverage the knowledge and the experience of their parents, who are the one people on earth that want nothing but the best for you, right? And
Right.
so, as a parent too, selfishly, like, I want my kids to come to me, right? Like, I want to be part of those decisions. I want them to leverage my experiences. I don't want to. So that's kind of the idea behind what I've been doing lately with Money Talkers and how I got there.
Awesome, awesome podcast. So we'll make sure and put that in our show notes too, so people can find you. And
Yeah, I'd love that. It's just, you know, like I said, it's kind of putting a stamp out there. And the amazing thing is that I have yet to meet an adult that was like, Yeah, I'm pretty glad that we didn't talk about money when I was a kid, right? Like nobody ever says that. They're like, yeah, it was really fun learning all those mistakes all over again, right? And so it's really kind of a crazy thing because it's this giant problem staring at us in the face, and I wouldn't say nobody, but there's very few people doing anything about it. And so I've kind of said, okay, you know what? I'll go fight it. Let's go. Like I've been a fighter my whole life, so I'll go take it on and see where I go. It might beat me down, but I get up every time. So
Yeah, yeah. So talk about tenacity. Talk about to be an entrepreneur, how tough do you have to be?
So like I said earlier, I went into thousands of businesses, right? As a commercial banker, and I had to do that because they were going to fire me because it was during the worst in banking time ever, and I was the last one to get hired. I was the youngest one, and they literally told me, my boss said, "You're going to get fired," right? He's like, "Well, there won't be 14 people on this team by the end of the year." He's like, "I've been in banking 30 years. Just trust me." And I'm like, "I told you my situation. I was 700 grand in the hole. I finally got a job," and I'm like, "You can't fire me." And he was like, "Just trust me." And I go, "What do I got to do?" He goes, "Make yourself unfireable." So by doing that, I couldn't just be good at the job. I couldn't have a great first year, right? Like I had to just outpace everybody so far that he wasn't allowed to fire me, is what he told me. He, to this day, best mentor I've ever had in my life. And I've paid tens of thousands of dollars for mentors before. This guy was my boss and just crushed it for me in my own head because he just break these things down for me. Just, how do I not get fired? Make yourself unfireable. Like the most simple answer ever. And I just stuck to it, And so I would go into this businesses. Like I was just outpacing them so far. And I was going in and in and in and in. So I kept seeing patterns. Like that's really been one of my gifts in life from God, was that I very easily recognize patterns especially when I meet people. Like I kind of look at what their core is on their why to do things. And so I saw some very similar traits. And I had a lot of people asking me at the time, what business should I go in? Because this is like 08, 09, 2010. And everybody's scared about their jobs and nobody knows what to do. And it was just an awful time. And like, in the, economic world. And so, they would ask me, what business should I go into? And I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter, man. I was like, I have like super wealthy doctors and I have very broke doctors. And I have a toy company and I have a sand maker and I have a printing shop. And I was like, they're all doing amazing, but I got the same exact people in the same exact industries doing awful, And so I learned one thing in the business side of things is that, there are 6 pieces to a business, and it's every business. So when you write a business plan, you go in through, everybody likes to talk usually about operations if that's what they do, right? Because everyone says, well, I was a chef, so I'm going to open a restaurant, and then I'm going to cook, and I'm going to be the great chef ever. And usually the other one they want to talk about is usually like marketing for some reason. That one's kind of because it's like the funnest one, right? And so, but they don't get into, what are we going to look at for sales and margins, right? They do marketing. And then you've got operations and customer service, and then you've got finance, right? And so, and in finance, you've got not just knowing your numbers, but also like AR and AP and HR and all that fun stuff, like the actual operation side of finance. And so a lot of people don't go in with a plan for each one of those. And I try to preach this to people because you're going to have to handle each one of those at some point. And if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail, right? What is the ultimate? When you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? And so that's one part of it. The other part of it is the one word that I would say that describes most successful, high achieving entrepreneurs that I interview. I mean, I've interviewed billionaires. I've interviewed people that manage billions of dollars. Like I said, I interviewed a guy today that started Carvana, which is a $25 billion company now. They have perseverance, right? And so that one word is the one that I think ties them all together, is that, as an overall description of what I see from them, is that they write a plan and they will just try to execute it. No problem. No way, no how. Don't tell them no. And if they need to make a decision, they make it fast, very, very fast, and they don't second guess themselves. And those things, I read it in a book that changed my life when we really blew up the last company before we sold it. I read a quote that said, more harm is done by indecision than wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And I needed to hear that so bad, because I'm a classic overthinker of problems. Someone asks me a problem, I'm like, I want to give them the perfect answer, and I want to look at it from all sides and tell them what I think, and let me get back to you. Let me think about it. And I just start collecting their questions, and it slowed everything down. And I was generally no more right or no more wrong if I thought about the problem for a week and got back to them. But there was many times that they left a problem with me that I never even gave them an answer. So it went unanswered and the business just slowed down. So those things like perseverance, expedient decision-making, and decisive decision-making when people ask you a question. And then the last part is like, you've got to have a plan for those parts of your business. And you can go into any business. I think one of the things when we originally were talking, I think you asked me about like, how did I get into my vocation? And I was like, I've been in a lot of them. That's the problem. So, but over the majority of it, I've been an entrepreneur, and now my skill set is transitionable, right? So I own 3 companies now, and I have all the free time in the world. And
that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, because I know, it's like what Edison said. It's like, I know 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Right. Like it wasn't like this like magic thing that like I read this book and I got the secret from behind the curtain or anything, and like some mentor just dropped one knowledge bomb on me and all of a sudden I was good to go. But like I found people that had been where I'd wanted to go, and I asked them for information and emulated what they did, and I copied success. And then by doing that, you realize that it's a repeatable piece, right? The last company we did $1 million in the first 8 months. And it wasn't like this overnight internet based, type of thing like success. But I knew the company, I basically took all the barriers inside of the company out of it before we even opened it, and it does $1 million plus. I have 1 employee, It's just super efficient. And yeah. And you want to know the funniest thing? I've never been there. Wow. So, the Money Talkers business is for what I'm doing as far as on the movement side of it, in coaching and consulting, business owners to get to go from being self-employed to being a business owner is now that's the secret that I've really kind of figured out, like how to do that part of it. And it's something that I want to make sure that it's I'm bringing to the world now, because it was absolutely life-changing for me, because I was 70 hours a week guy. And then now, like, I literally have the ability to go and do anything I want at any point in time. And it's not a brag. It's not a thing, but it's like, I want more people to have that. It's not like, look what I got. It's like, dude, you should have this. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Right. And I have the anxieties and the stresses and the same things that we all go through dailies and stuff, but like, but it's not the same like it was 5 years ago for me, and I hit my goal. I hit that fire goal that I'd set out for myself 10 years earlier, when it looked like it was absolute foolishness to even like consider that would be there. And that's why a lot of times when I talk to business owners and they say, well, you don't understand, or I can't start a business or run a business because, I have XYZ debt or XYZ hold up or whatever it's in their brain that tells them they can't do it. And I'm like, you ever been 700 grand in the hole with no job? and the IRS calling you? Like, you're better off than I was. Right. So.
Yeah. So, how old are your kids now?
They are 6 and 8 now. And I quit when they were 4 and 6.
That is wonderful.
So.
And you have a supportive wife. So you said when you were in school, when you were saying, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire, not too much support. But then you have a wife who says, quit, you go ahead, quit tomorrow. I mean, how important is having that kind of support when you're actually trying to create something?
She was there when I was sitting on the porch of my condo in foreclosure. It was kind of a surreal moment. We're on the 8th floor looking at the ocean, sitting in these hammock hanging chairs. Our 2 dogs are there. We've been on credit cards for months, and like, I don't typically go too far into like the woe is me crowd. I've been an athlete most of my life, so it's like, if you don't like the outcome, just do something about it, right? That's always been my mentality. And I usually like to fight back. I don't like to be told what to do, or I can't do something, and those kinds of things. That's usually like fighting words for me. I'm going to town, right? And I was in that like pity mode, which is not a good spot for me. And we were sitting out there just like, she just started laughing, we were sitting there, and it was like, I can't believe what is going on, and it was like, well, I had to make the decision that like, I had to stop looking at like the world was doing something to me, right? The world couldn't care less about me. It doesn't, it will run without me. It will run with me. It just doesn't, it's just, what can I control? Right. And I hope this reaches some people in the time that we're in right now, because I know what the stresses are of the small business owners. I didn't go through the same thing, because I wasn't told to close down, but I had gone through very similar pieces. And so we were just out there laughing, and because we couldn't do anything else but laugh at it. And the thing is like, it went straight from pity to like ridiculousness to determination. Like right then and there in that conversation. And she just looked at me, she's like, what are we gonna do? And I was like, I'm gonna do something about it. I don't know what yet, but I was like, I am just gonna start. I was like, because if I always believe that lucky people is where preparation meets opportunity, right? We all have opportunities that come up in our life, but if you don't prepare to take advantage of them and don't prepare to jump on them or do something about it, then you're never gonna get lucky. Right? You're never gonna be one of the lucky ones. That you have to be prepared. And so I just said, you know what? I'm gonna go all out, whether it works out or not. It's not gonna be because of my fault, right? And so I did, and that was kind of, I was telling you earlier, like that story. Like I got to be this commercial banker. The thing was, I went to Wachovia where I banked. I found out like I wanted to be a business banker. The guy told me what the salary was, and then I was like, oh gosh, like I could really use that. Like that would be fantastic. Like that would be amazing. I need that. And so I went upstairs and I learned how to write a resume, because I never had one. And I wrote a resume and I uploaded it, and I got 3 letters of recommendation from people at Wachovia, because I was going to work there. And I'm like, they're going to just love me, because I just had 4 companies and I built $1 million company at 26, 27 years old. Like this should be a shoe-in, right? I send them out, 25 applications, and 24 of them come back within 5 minutes as automatic rejections. I have 1 that didn't come back, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for it. I was just sitting there like, wow, So a couple days goes by, phone rings, lady answers the phone. I answer the phone. I'm like, hey, how are you? And she says, oh, I'm a recruiter from Wachovia. And I'm like, oh, awesome, amazing. Like, she was like, don't get your hopes up. We're not hiring you. I'm like, what? And she goes, I'm a roving recruiter, so I have a quota and I don't have enough people to call, so I'm calling you. But you are from the real estate and mortgage industry, and we're not going to hire you. You guys are toxic. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, okay. So I was like, well, you have to take me on the phone, so let's do this, right? And she was like, well, okay, I wasn't expecting you to say that. And I was like, absolutely. I was like, which job are you calling me about? And she said, it's in Sebring, Florida, which you don't know is in the middle of the state of Florida, in a very small rundown town in like Okeechobee, like area, like swampland. Like it's not, and I'm like, and I'm living on the beach, right? In this condo and stuff. And she's like, yeah, she's like, it pays, $20,000 a year. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, great. I was like, let's talk, And so we start talking. I kept her on the phone for about an hour and a half. I'm going to sell, right? Because like I said, I'm going to go all out. So at the end of that hour and a half interview, she says, you are so overqualified for this job. And I go, that is the best news I've heard all day. And she goes, I just can't stop being blown away by things you say, because what does that mean? And I go, I don't want this job. I go, I want the business banker job. I was like, do you know the recruiter for that? And she was like, she goes, yeah. She goes, that's Maritza. And I remember Maritza's name to this day. And she said, that's Maritza. And I said, I said, could you send her an email just asking her to give me a call so I can have an interview? Like, you can just tell her how overqualified I am for your job if you want. And she was like, yeah. She goes, okay, I'll do that. So she sent, I was like, could you CC me on that just so I know it went out? And she was like, yeah, no problem. So whatever, she sends it off. Nothing, right? So I start emailing Maritza 3 times a day. And so, yes. And so a week goes by. Mind you, this is the only job prospect I have. I have nothing else in the bucket to go like interview on. Like, I don't even have anything else lined up. I don't even know what else is out there. And I'm probably not going to, because every time I sent, I'd put in 100, 200 applications, they'd all just come back with nothing,
Mm-hmm.
So my phone rings. I answer the phone. She was like, do you know who this is? I was like, no. She goes, it's Maritza. And I was like, oh, awesome. I've been emailing you. And she was like, oh, I know. And she was like, would you please stop emailing me? I was like, absolutely. I will stop emailing. She goes, thank you. And I go, when's my interview? And she was like, what? And I go, the only way I'm ever going to stop emailing you is if you give me an interview. She goes, we're not going to hire you. And I was like, I have heard that before. I was like, but the good news is, I was like, if I go to the interview and you guys don't hire me, I was like, you'll never get another email from me. So is that we're going to trade? And she was like, you know what? Just because you're being that you acting like you want the job, right? Which is a big key for people out there. If there's something that you want, and it's a job specifically, go tell the person hiring that you want to work there, right? That's a huge lesson that I got. And so I have one suit because I've never been in a suit. I just happen to own one, right? I always worked in flip flops and board shorts on the, I'd never met any clients or anything. So I built all this stuff, and so I own one suit and it's awful. And I get there and I don't even have like a briefcase or anything. I have no money. I'm just like, I'm in like dire straits. Right. And so I just studied so hard for this interview. I found out what kind of interview style it was. I found out ways to, it's called it's called a STAR interview, a situation, task, action, results. The only interview I ever did. And so, I went in and I walk in and there's 5 guys there. They're all like to the nines, like briefcases, nice watches, like clean, just like super bankers. Right. And I'm like, oh man. They're like, oh, what are you here for? And I'm like, oh, for the business banking interview. And they're like, and I'm like, and I'm like, okay, so I got to figure something out quick. So I was going in with all my experience and I had to pivot right on the spot and change my entire presentation I was going to do. And I did. And I walked in and I said, and they were like, the 2 people interviewing me looked at me and they were like, what, like, kind of like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
27. And, and I'm like, well, I was like, first of all, they're like, are you the one that kept emailing Maritza? And I was like, yes, I am. And I was like, imagine how hard I'll work for you if I bothered her that much just for an interview. And they were like, oh, okay. So I said, listen, I don't have 20 years of banking experience. I was like, there's 5 guys sitting out there that do. They're all saying the 5 guys sitting out there. I'm like, I don't have any of their bad habits. I got zero of them. I go, I don't even know exactly what you do as a business banker. I was like, but I have drive, I have perseverance, I have talent, I have, I just laid out, this is what I got. You make me whatever you want, and hour goes by. I walk out of that meeting. My wife calls me, and I'm probably it still welts me up to this day. She calls me and she says, how'd it go? And I said, man, I couldn't have done any better. I left it on the table. I didn't hold back. I did it all. If I don't get the job, I said, they told me they would call me in a couple of weeks, which I don't have enough money to make it a couple of weeks, anyway. And they said, well, don't call us, we'll call you, kind of thing. And I said, babe, I don't know, like I couldn't have interviewed any better than I did. And I said, if I don't get it, I don't get it. But again, I did my part. I left. An hour later, I was sitting on by a lake with my friend because I needed a break at that point. And I was sitting there, and my phone rings, and it's Maritza, and she said, "We're going to hire you, and we don't want you to go anywhere. We don't want you to go any more interviews. We were supposed to wait a couple of weeks, but it's been an hour since your interview. They're still interviewing guys, but they said you're definitely being hired." And so,
That is amazing. That is
yeah.
amazing story.
And so that was where she said, well, what are you expecting? And I told her the number that the guy in the bank told me. And she was like, whoa, I don't know if we can get that. And so long story short, I found out I negotiated the highest salary on the team, which I didn't even mean. It was a total accident. And then, and that's when the boss that brought me in, he goes, yeah, you're the first one to go. You're the youngest, you're the last one hired. And somehow you have the highest salary.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, you can pay me less, man. Like, I don't care. Just don't fire me.
Don't fire me.
Yeah, just don't fire me. So make yourself unfireable.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, what an amazing story. So, just to change gears a little here.
Sure.
So, what should parents be talking to their kids about?
Oh, that is a great question, right? There's this concept in mentorship that I'll kind of relay that makes a lot of sense to me. I find that there's some false narratives that parents tell themselves to not talk to their kids, right? One is, well, it's an anxiety inducing thought. So the two ones are birds and the bees and money, right? And most parents actually say that they'd rather have the birds and the bees conversation than talk about money with their kids, right? And so they think they're going to get judged by their kids, right? Because when you're going to tell them to do something and then you don't do it. Well, that's the real trick though, right? That's a Stephen Covey principle, which is whatever you learn, you should teach because it ingrains it in you, and you have to live by your words more, right? So one, it's going to understand where your money story came from, which is your parents, your experiences, what's the choices you've made, what outcomes came from those choices, and what it is in your household. Like, what are you putting out in your household? Or do you have a scarcity mindset? Do you say, we can't afford that, or that's super expensive all the time? Like, those words have power, right? So instead of saying like, we can't afford that, you say, how do we afford this, right? How would we go out and afford this? The other one that I think comes up a lot is that parents feel like they don't know enough, right? I'm not a financial guru. Like, how am I going to teach you about finances? And that's where the mentoring concept comes up, is that you need to be one step ahead. I guarantee you that you know more about finance than your kids, right? You know what a checking account is. You know what a mortgage is. You know what a car loan is. You know what an interest rate is. And you know what a credit score is. And if you don't know how to explain it, man, there's so many resources. You have no excuses not to do it, right? And so in my podcast, we do two pieces. We do a 30 or 40-minute interview to really kind of deep dive into these high achievers and these entrepreneurs. And then we do another one that's 8 to 10 minutes long, and it's one question, and it's a money talk that you can go have with your kids. So you can listen for 8 or 10 minutes, get one concept, and go have a 10-minute conversation with your kids, because what you're going to do is you're going to change your financial trajectory, right? So you think about, so when you just ask me like what they should talk about, honestly, anything is better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the space shuttle taking off from Earth, right? And it's going to the moon. Like, if you move it just a couple inches on an angle, it ends up a million miles different away, right? Because the trajectory is so long. Well, when you think about what a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 20-year-old, the amount of time that they have in front of themselves, that if you can get any lesson to stick, it's gonna bump it, an inch here, an inch there. And so the idea is more to just open the relationship and make sure that you're trying to give them good advice. Because if you're listening to something like this podcast, like we're talking right now, you're already intentionally wanting to learn to get better and be better and take intentional listening and take action and feel good things into your mind. Well, then take action, because knowledge isn't power, right? It's important, but it is not power. Power comes from taking action with the knowledge that you acquire. And so if you're listening to this, like, just have those talks. And I'll give you, I have learned so much from having these conversations with people and my kids and applying it directly with them, because I can't talk to these people about it and then not go live it, right?
Exactly.
And so, I'm obviously like a more open person about talking about money and success and failures and all that fun stuff anyway, because I think we all learn from it. But can I give you a quick story that happened to me from the podcast?
Yeah.
In my life? And so my son is 6, right? And he is a very empathetic person. He's very, and so um, I was talking with someone, and um, they said, when you get stuck in a question with your kids, regardless of what the subject is, and you're uncomfortable, don't ever shut it down. Ask them why they're asking. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds cool. I just kind of went in, and this is where it's amazing, because you plant seeds in yourself, right? When you're bringing this knowledge in. And so not a week later, I'm walking by and I've got food to go out on the grill, and I'm put it down. I come back in, and my son's standing there, and he goes, Dad. And I go, yeah. And he goes, how much money do you have? And he just stands there, and I'm like, oh no. Like, I'm like, I'm like, I know I'm not supposed to like tell him, just like shut it down, don't worry about it, but like, do I like go into like detail with it? And I'm like, I've got all these like questions, right, like running through my head. So it's not like I'm not immune to the same anxieties that parents have.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered that, right? And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, buddy, I said, why are you asking me that? And he said, Dad, I have $100 bill, and if you don't have $100, I want to give it to you so that you can have the $100 bill, not me, because
Uh-huh.
you're the head of the family, and you'll know what to do with it. And I mean, I can't even tell you, like, I would have missed this moment, right? If I wasn't having these conversations, and I wasn't listening to people, or I wasn't trying to seek out ways to teach them better, I would have missed this moment that to me will be forever ingrained in my brain as one of the most amazing, sweet moments of my life.
So sweet. Yeah, I just felt it so strongly in my heart. That is so sweet.
It just, I mean, I almost like fell down crying at the point when he did it to me, because I was just, because I went through that whole process of things that I tell people, but like, I couldn't shut it down. I couldn't, I just went back to this little bit of a training. So these little pieces of advice that you can pick up are so powerful in your household, because, like I said, it's just, it doesn't need to be mountain moving. If there's 25 financial concepts that you want to teach them, and you go to teach them and they pick up 4 or 5 of them, like, fantastic. You've done an amazing job. Like, you've just opened up the conversation, and you've planted some seeds. And so as they have more and more questions, they know that they can come to you. And like I said earlier in the podcast, you're the one person on the planet that wants absolutely nothing but the best for them. Right? Everybody else is, if they go for financial advice to different places, they have different motives. You're the only pure source from the motive side of it, anyway. And that means something.
Yeah, it really does. So I had a question for you. So let's say you want to take advantage of that compounding interest that you learned about in college. And so, we know that the earlier you start, the better.
Yep.
So what are the best things for kids to invest in, or 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, to take advantage of that while they're young?
Absolutely. Well, their situation matters. So, but if they have a job, let's say, and a 401k opportunity or anything like that, if there's a match, whatever the amount of the match is, that is 100% the minimum that you should be putting in, right? So if I gave you an investment opportunity and I said, Kimberly, listen, if you give me $5,000, I'll give you $10,000 back, right? I'm assuming you would take the deal, right? 100% returns. Are you kidding me? That's what a match is. A match is literally 100% investment return. So if they have a job, then that's the way to go, right? And what I would tell them is that what matters more historically in this is fees. And so most like mutual funds are heavy on fees. And I'll give you an example of the time trajectory that I'm talking about and how compound interest works. So like if you have a 16-year-old and your 16-year-old can work 1 hour a week and put $10 away, they can be a multimillionaire by the time they're 76. They're going to put a total of, I think it's $32,000. I have to recheck it, but I think it's $32,000 in $10 a week from 16 to 76. Now that's it, assuming they put it in the S&P 500, which is where I would put it, which is 500 largest companies in the country, and they continually monitor it. And then you get something that's very, very low cost, like Schwab or Vanguard. their fees are like 0.13% or something. It's an insane low amount because you're basically just buying this one fund, right? And it tracks the market. Very few people can ever beat the market. Warren Buffett was famous in 2008. He made a bet with a hedge fund guy. You know, and the hedge fund guys are supposed to be super smart. He said, I'll put $1 million in the S&P 500. You put $1 million in your hedge fund. And in 10 years from today, we'll see whoever has more money. And whoever has more money, the other one has to donate it to the charity of their choice, right? And Warren Buffett won, right? So this is a money who buys companies. He's telling you put it in S&P 500, right? So that number comes out to close. It's like a historically returned 12%. I use 9% because it's a little safer, but that number comes out to about $1.8 million. $32,000 in, $1.8 million in the bank, right? And that's cash. And if you do it with a Roth IRA, that's tax-free cash that's in there, which is amazing. And that's only if they did nothing else right their entire life in investing or, you know, cryptos or trying to figure out investments or anything. No. Consistency is what you're looking for. You buy when it's up, you buy when it's down. Just keep putting the money, because when it's up, you're getting less for your money. When it goes down, you're buying more of the company for the same amount of money. So up and down doesn't matter. It's consistency and longevity. If you put that same amount of money into a mutual fund that had a fee of, let's say, 1.5%, which is kind of okay, right? That same 1.8, even though you're losing 1% of your investment, it drops down to about 600 grand, which is still amazing. You put 32 grand in, right? So you got 600 grand back. But if you could get 1.8 and get 3 times as much money, then that's where the fees are actually where that determine the return quite a bit more than the actual investments.
All right. Well, that is great advice.
And then I would say this, right? So another last thing I'll say I can give you, because obviously I like sayings, right? So the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is to do it today, right?
I was gonna say right now.
Yeah. So don't ever think that like you're either you as a parent too, and like you're too late or it's too long or whatever else, but take the half an hour or hour it takes to set this thing up. Like, how much binge watching will you do on a Netflix series, right? It does nothing for you. Like, go take the hour to do this. Or if you need to like fix credit or like learn about credit and you want to teach your kids about it, like take the hour to do it. It's not as complicated as you think. And the resources out there are unbelievable, you know?
That's beautiful. Thank you. So just a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life?
The easiest one for me is to say family. Like I absolutely love watching my kids grow up. I am seeing what I think my dad saw, right? So I'm seeing these moments that I really love. I mentioned earlier, I lost when I was 19. I lost my mom 2 months before my daughter was born. And so there's a lot of conversations I didn't get to have. You know, my dad was my best friend growing up, but like it was still in that like parental role of when you're in like primary schools, right? And so the conversations I imagine would have been quite a different conversation when we went to go have a beer, you know, or I was starting these companies or I was doing this stuff. And so I didn't have those conversations, and I think about that a lot, right? So what I try to do is, one, I'm recording myself right now, right? When I do podcasts and I do these things, like there's going to be some resources for them to be able to go back and hear my thoughts on bigger subjects. But two, like I don't try to leave anything on the table when I have the opportunity to be with them. I'm very present when I'm with them. When they ask me, hey, can we go do this? My answer is 99% yeah. You know, like let's go do it. Whether I think it's you know, if they want to go and you know, I don't know what it is. They want to make my daughter will want to make a bowl of slime. It's like her favorite thing in the world. She's like, can I make a bowl of slime? I'm like, yeah.
At that age.
I just bought her like a 2-gallon thing of Elmer's glue, which is amazing. She uses contact solution and shit. I don't even know. She has like all these concoctions and mixtures, and like, I just don't want to clamp that thing in, and I want to go play with them with it. Right. Like I want to be present. I want to have these times, these fun things where like they look back and go, man, like if for God forbid I'm gone tomorrow, like it wasn't ever like, well, no, like this TV show is too important, or
Mhm.
any of those things. Like if it doesn't matter in 5 years, don't spend 5 minutes on it. Right. And I feel that way about stressful stuff too. Like I really, really, really try to drop baggage. Like when I think about like when I got the pressures of life on you,
Mhm.
I think about them as in actual duffel bags that are holding me down and I'm trying to walk. And
Uh-huh.
I mentally take that and I drop that and I go, okay, what am I going to do about it? And I change my paradigm. And I immediately think, okay, what can I do that is the best thing that I can do about it? Do that and drop it. Right. And so I really try to do that so that I don't bring it to them, because I did that a lot. In the first few years of the when I was working 70 plus hours a week.
I
And
love that. I
you
love
know
that. The thought of just dropping it.
it's an amazing feeling, because you literally you feel lighter, right? And so you stop, and you have to stop, and you have to like literally acknowledge it, right? If you're
Mhm.
feeling that pressure and you're feeling that thing, like stop, acknowledge it, because it's there, but it's
Mhm.
not really there. You're the only one making it. And
Mhm.
so I had a lot of anxiety in my 20s and 30s, and I had to come up with ways to deal with it. And that was one of the things, is that like, okay, I'm going to take whatever's bothering me, I'm going to smash it up, I'm going to shove it in a bag, and then I'm going to hold it for a minute, and I'm going to just think about why in the world does this bother me so bad? And then I'm just going to let it go.
Mhm.
And when I started doing that, my clarity in business, my clarity in my family home, my home became a lot better.
Mhm.
Right. I was able to say, I was able to be there 100% instead of 80% or 90%, or like, checking the BlackBerry back in the day, or like,
Mhm.
or sitting at the park and I'm on the phone while they're on the swing set. Like, nah, man, if you're going to take the time to do something with the kids, like do it.
Mhm. And
Right.
so if people wanted to find you, do you have a website? How do they find your podcast?
Sure. No, I appreciate that opportunity and you asking. And if you're still listening, I appreciate you listening as well. So, the podcast is called Money Talkers with Cody Loughlin, and it's in everywhere you can look. So iTunes and Spotify and Android and all that fun stuff. And there's, like I said, there's two parts to it. So if you don't have a lot of time and this is something that interests you and you want to learn or you want to hear from people, I mean, I'm telling you, some of the people, I don't even know how I get people on this podcast that I get. It's unbelievable, because everybody knows this is so needed, right? So they're very open, especially entrepreneurs, like really hiring entrepreneurs, or like they're already by inherently problem solvers,
Mhm.
and so they want to give back and solve problems for kids, right? So they're usually very open. So long story short, Money Talkers podcast. And then if you want to connect with me, I'm all over social media. You can look me up, send me a request or send me a note, tell me you came from the podcast. And in the last place is themoneytalkers.com. We'll have all the up-to-date stuff that I have going on. So I have some programs, like business, like I have a business plan writing template with a video series that goes along with it for you to be able to write a business plan with your kids.
Oh,
Right.
wonderful.
I have a free resource of 105 business ideas for kids, right? And so it's a way for you to start that framework so that they understand later how to start a business, and you need to think about each part of those, but it's broken down for them. And then I do a video series along with it that is very helpful. And the last part I would tell you is that if you are a business owner and are either stuck as a self-employed person with employees, or you are stuck in not being able to take the next level up, reach out to me as well, and I'll be able to provide some resources for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for being on the podcast today and for your wonderful stories and just being really open and sharing the ups, the downs, everything. So thank you so much.
No, I just appreciate being able to be here. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we get off the podcast. What is your best advice in living an incredible, amazing life?
Oh, that is a great question. Um, I've got a couple pieces to it, if that's okay. One, I would tell you, define what is an amazing, incredible life for you, right? Because the idea of it doesn't matter unless you have context to it. There's no goal to shoot for, right? It's like being happy, right? Well, yeah, and realize this was the best advice I think that my mom ever gave me. You're the only person that can make yourself happy, right? And it didn't mean a lot to me when I was a kid. I didn't really understand what that meant. And then I realized, like, people say, oh, if I get this job, I'll be happy. If I marry that person, I'll be happy. If I, whatever it is, whatever that accomplishment, if I buy the right car, I'll be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you might be temporarily, but if you're not internally feeling that way, that you need to, that is going to fix it for you, you need to look at what you're trying to fix first.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I would say, set goals, figure out what happiness or what the incredible life is for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I heard about FIRE, I was like, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it next year. It was a 10-year plan. And then what I did is, I would tell you this, actionably set up where you goals and achievements that you would need to hit to get to the plan that you wanted to get to, whatever that incredible life piece is. So immediately you have to have gratitude into where your life is currently, because nothing that you do or buy or think is going to make you happy. You only come from inside, right? You're the only person that can make yourself happy. The second thing is that if you want to have that incredible life, determine what the incredible life would look like to you, back it up, and give yourself a why to get to it. Because the only way that you're going to go through and sacrifice the things that need to be done, and I don't think of sacrifice in a bad way. I think of sacrifice as in an intentional choice to get to where I want to go, right? Not I'm giving up something, and there were things that I gave up in a sacrifice, but it was because I was intentionally choosing, because I wanted to be home with my kids and my family. And I knew that I wanted to have that as a goal in life, because I knew how much it meant to me, and I needed to refulfill that thing with my parents gone. Right. So I knew that I needed that, and I wanted that badly. And so when opportunities came up to go blow money or not pay the debt down that I had accrued, right, I paid all that off. I never filed bankruptcy as I should have, but I put myself through 6 years of paying that stuff off. But by the time I'd done that, I built the habits. But I knew I never felt bad. I was like, man, I get to pay an extra $300 to that credit card that I wrote off 4 years ago, right? That ain't fun.
No.
But if I didn't do that, I wasn't going to get to where I wanted to go. I couldn't start buying an investment property. I couldn't buy a house. I couldn't get free. I couldn't take that money. And then when it all rolled in, I was debt free. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that's the secret for me, is identifying what it is and make that your sole focus to get to. Right. And stay on target, stay at that North Star, right, that you're aiming for, and consistently don't veer off into things that don't get you to where you're wanting to go, because there's lots of time wasters, there's lots of money wasters out there. And get to where you want to go once you define it, and use that as a why, and put it somewhere visually or talk about it. Okay. Do not internalize it. Talk about it. Get it out there. Put it out into the world. I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. I'm going to retire by the time I'm 39. Like, I would tell people this stuff, and they were like, are you crazy? Like, I know your financial situation. I'm like, watch me. I'm going to do it. Watch. Just because I was affirming it inside of me, and I knew where I wanted to go. And whenever there was things that came up that didn't fit my plan, it didn't bother me. I wasn't sacrificing them. I was choosing to go after what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that advice. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.